we've been able to see deals that were listed at $120,000 that we ended up purchasing for 80.
Welcome back to the Indie Investor Podcast. Got Nick Giulioni with me today. What's going on, Nick?
Hey, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, man. A long time no see. I think last time you were in California, and now you're in Carmel. So, which people from Carmel like to call it Carmel. Are you a Carmel or a Carmel guy?
Carmel is what we call it in California. Out here, I'm calling it Carmel.
All right, you're going Indiana style. So
absolutely,
that sounds.
I'm a Hoosier.
Good. That's right, man. Hoosier at heart. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Nick Giulioni. If you guys haven't heard of Nick, he really just has an amazing story. Number one, started investing in Indianapolis, has a wife, Diane. They started investing here, bought around 150 properties in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, you guys killed it. It just came out the gate, right? You're just chucking properties here and there and managing those, doing a lot of flips here in Indianapolis, moved out here, in Carmel around 2020. Actually left your job in March 2022, made a decision to go full time. So now you're coaching, you're managing 10 to 15 flipping projects at a time, and you're just entrenched in real estate investing. So just give me your take on this, because like you're relatively new to, I guess, full time. Is that, I don't know, do you call that full time investor? What's that like?
It's been a wild ride. We actually just crossed the 1-year anniversary point of when I actually made that full-time shift. And it's been absolutely bananas. Now, my entire history, the way you described it made it sound a whole lot smoother than it actually went. But it's been kind of bananas. I chose an interesting time to do it, it turned out, with the market being pretty darn hot all the way up until the summer, and then things kind of taking a weird little slide there. But overall, it's been quite the interesting scenario where we actually now are considered full-time real estate professionals. So my income or lack thereof can count against my wife's. So lots of different advantages. Plus, I get to get more entrenched. I get to hang out with you and the rest of your team a little more often. So can't complain about a thing.
Yes. And we love hanging out with you. We've done some projects together, and we've sold quite a few deals to the Giulioni family, so thank you for that. But man, today we're really going to dive into just a certain topic that is hot, literally on everyone's minds, and it's hot on my mind too. So I want to kind of pick your brain on this, Nick. So because I've ventured back into full-time real estate myself, CEO of the Simple team, and we're always trying to figure out, how do we find deals today? I've been in this business 16 years, and I've had to pivot many times, and we're in that pivoting moment right now. And it's like, okay, what do we do? How do we do this again? And how do we find deals now versus a year ago or 2 years ago, because things might have shifted and changed. So I want to kind of start with that. Maybe just start off high level. What do you do, and how are you finding deals?
Yeah. So I think we have to take just a quarter step back to answer that question and really just understand where the market is today. Mm-hmm. We are seeing such incredibly low inventory out there. And there are a variety of reasons why that might be the case. And all of these things influence why it's tough to find a deal today. So with that low inventory, the reason that exists is, who wants to sell into a soft market? If you have the option to not sell, you're going to hold on to things when market's a little funky. On top of that, if you have your home with an interest rate of 2.75%, are you going to be likely to sell when any house that you're going to buy after this point, your interest rate is going to be in the sixes? It's going to be a little less likely. Now, I heard this statistic. I don't know if it's true, so please don't quote me on it. But the statistic I heard is that 75% of homeowners out there have a loan at 4% or lower. Mm-hmm. That's going to have a huge downward impact on the available houses that are out there. On top of that, with interest rates rising today, who knows what's going to happen here in this next one? People are really seeing an affordability crisis. People buy based on payment, not based on the actual price. And with low inventory, prices haven't necessarily dropped all that much, but that payment has gone up substantially. Yeah. This is kind of having a weird, depressing issue on the demand in general. So overall, this is just an incredibly weird market that we're in. So with that said, how the heck do we find deals today? the thesis I've been kind of working with my team is that over the last several years, you just any house that you could find at a halfway affordable price, you had to go nuts for.
Yeah.
That's not where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
Our thesis today is that we need to find the right seller, not the right house.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find that distress in a seller that exists versus just finding that perfect house that used to fit our criteria. We've got to be a little bit more of a shotgun approach.
Yeah.
We got to kind of go out there and make a whole lot of offers and see what actually hits.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. I want to dig into that. So finding the right seller, and I want to talk about what is the right seller in this particular market, because that might be a little bit different than it used to be. So for example, used to be, I think when direct mail started becoming big and we started to buy lists and go to list source and get lists, we would find, vacant houses or abandoned houses of out-of-state sellers. That was like the number one thing, right? Out-of-state sellers with vacant, abandoned houses that were boarded up and had fines against them. That might not be the seller that we're looking for today. So I want to ask you, what is that right seller? Number one, yeah, are they in distress? But are the reasons a little bit different than maybe when we first started?
Yeah, and I can't speak as intelligently to the direct to seller stuff. That's not an area I've spent a ton of time. Where we spend most of our time is with wholesalers like yourself, and actually deals that are currently sitting on the market. And so what these sellers tend to look like in a variety of situations is there some financial distress that they're dealing with? It's in most cases not going to be the financing distress because they've got a pretty low interest rate. But can we hit that other 25% that actually doesn't have that incredibly low rate? Can we find those people that are struggling? Can we find people that have short-term financing that is distressed? Can we find people that have had unfortunately a death in the family and just don't want to deal with that house anymore? The distress isn't necessarily going to be somebody just saying, "Hey, I want to capitalize on the top of the market." You have to find something that's a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Some examples that we've recently had was there was a property where somebody had purchased a home, had started the gut job, ran out of money. That's some distress that you can definitely hit on. We had another one where there was a death in the family, like we were just talking about, and the seller just wanted to be done. And so we came with a plan to them, and they ended up taking it, and it ended up being a big win for us and a win for them as well. So those are kind of our approaches. Definitely be curious to hear from your perspective who the right sellers are from a direct to seller perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny that I mentioned just way back when that we used to try to find, again, vacant abandoned houses from out-of-state sellers. Seems like that isn't as available now. A lot of our sellers, honestly, are living in the homes. I mean, we used to buy vacant houses. We could get into it, get other investors into it, not worry about it. Now, the amount of houses that we're buying with literally someone living in there, so the actual homeowners living in that particular home, has jumped through the roof. And why is that? Yeah, are they in some sort of distress? A lot of times they need to sell their house, I think, for cash. But here's the other issue that we've actually ran into, and we're always trying to be creative on this. Like, what can we really do? Is a lot of people, they might have an 80 or 90 or $100,000 house. Maybe they inherited it. We've had some of those, and they need to sell their house because they don't have any money. But now they can't move anywhere because they can't buy that particular house. So that's always like become this big issue. But I think for us, I think we're going to dive into this a little bit. The creative financing strategy, I think, is really, really big right now. Because, yeah, I mean, people's that mortgage changed, or they had to shift, or maybe they had a 5-year arm or something like that, and things are shifting and they're having trouble making those payments. Those are something that we're kind of really running into as far as distress. Those are a few examples from us, but it's just kind of, yeah, we're just, honestly, we're pivoting and we're trying to figure it out just like everybody else. So,
Yeah. I think we're all just kind of looking for what the right opportunity is here in today's market.
Yeah. One of the other things is too, yeah, I mean, sometimes like we used to buy properties off the MLS and that hasn't worked for an extremely long time. And now we're starting to see properties, typically someone lists a property, selling frenzy, overpriced, multiple offer situation, and then they would fly off the shelf. Now, if you start to see properties on the market a little bit longer, I do think that the MLS could be a strategy it is starting to come back.
Yeah, that's something we've actually worked with. And I don't know if you call this kind of person a wholesaler. So apologies if I'm using the wrong term or if I'm offending somebody by saying it. But we've worked with a couple of people that really all they do is they go make a bunch of offers on houses on the MLS. They get it under contract and then resell it. So it's a similar strategy to wholesale, but it is essentially on market wholesaling. And we've been able to see deals that were listed $120,000 that we ended up purchasing for 80.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of people shooting for the moon on the MLS, and then huge opportunities there to get those discounted if they're sitting there a while. One of the biggest strategies that I ask my students to do is don't just do an analysis once. Make an offer and get rejected and then move on.
Yeah.
You need to create some type of follow-up system, some type of database that you're going back and looking at whether that deal is still on the market. Mm-hmm. While you might not have gotten it for $80,000 in week 1, in week 6, if it's still sitting there, your initial $80,000 might seem a whole lot more appealing. Mm-hmm. So don't waste your effort by doing the analysis just once.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're reusing that on a daily basis.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, one of the things, again, I've just pounded, I already mentioned this once, is just that creative financing strategy. So typically in the past several years, we'd find the house, we'd offer cash, we'd be that one trick pony. If they didn't take it, okay, see you later, that's it. But now we're trying to find other avenues to possibly buy that house. I just did a podcast on my other podcast called The Novation Agreement. Not going to get into all that, but it's a way to kind of partner with the seller, but we can pay more money for the particular house. Another one is we had a house that they're asking, I think, $130,000 for, and our offer was $100,000 for cash, and we can't really do that. But they owed $120,000, and their interest rate was, I think, like 5%, somewhere around there. And another option is, hey, they moved to Atlanta, the house is vacant, they're making these payments. Instead of buying it cash, could we, take over the mortgage for them, put a little cash in their pocket? Could we keep that? Those are some creative strategies that we haven't visited in a while. So I think if you're a buyer out there, investor, you got to start thinking just creatively.
Absolutely. Yeah. My brain goes a couple of different directions with creative finance, specifically on kind of what the opportunities could exist in today's market. Now, I don't want people to kind of just jam these into every single deal because they're not going to make sense for most deals. They're not going to make sense for most sellers, but having these in your toolbox could make a lot of sense. One of the things that we've recently done with a house, we ended up buying a house from somebody that was in financial distress and allowing them to lease back from us. That was a huge opportunity if somebody wants to stay in the house, but can't, but needs the capital. Seller financing, always something that can exist. It might not be as prevalent as it was several years ago, but definitely an opportunity. Lease options, potentially taking control of a house while the other person still owns it is a huge opportunity. And then subject to, it's not something I have a whole lot of experience with, but subject to gives you the opportunity, like you were just talking about, to inherit somebody else's existing loan that might be at 3-5%, where you're not even going to get anywhere near that in today's market. You can overpay because your monthly payment will be so much lower than what you pay in today's market.
Exactly. Yeah. And it starts to be about the payment. Yeah. I mean, if you can buy a house with a payment at $750, but rent it out for $1,400, it starts to make sense. Right. So, awesome. Hey, let's just get into, so number one, finding deals, that's how we can, it's the right seller, not exactly the right house. But here's one thing, I think that you probably do this so much better than us. And that's the due diligence period. Because when I think about Nick Giulioni, I think about, it seems like you're just a very detailed person. Even with this podcast, I mean, you put notes down, you have a little outline, and I just feel like you're a very detailed person. So I'm sure that your due diligence is a little bit more detailed than most people's. What does that look like for you when you get a house? So you get this seller, it's the right seller, you get this house under contract, but then you're like, oh, you got to actually, and analyze the deal a little bit further. What's that look like for Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. So we go into every single deal with a pretty good idea of what things are going to look like. And when I say we, I'm talking about my entire acquisitions team that we work on it with. We look at photos. We come up with what we believe that scope of work is going to be before we ever walk it. Now, we have just kind of rough estimates, directional information. We have what the house is listed for, and then what we believe that ARV is going to be. Once we're under contract, or once we're able to get in there, we send our contractor through immediately. And he gets us a much more detailed scope of work. He helps us zone in on what that scope of work is finally going to be. That gives us the information we need to go work with the seller and say, hey, yeah, I know you want $80,000 for it. Sorry, that's not going to work. Our scope of work we were estimating was 50. Now it's actually going to be 55. So we've got to be at 75 in order for this to make sense for us. Otherwise, no hard feelings. So that gives us the negotiating room. So always get our contractor through. We always get an inspector through. Even though we've got a contractor who's on staff and works specifically for us, I would rather have 2 sets of qualified eyes on every single house, especially because I don't add any value by walking it. I'd rather get two sets of construction eyes on that sucker. I then send that inspection report to my contractor just to make sure that everything's covered in that scope of work and that we're really comfortable before that inspection window is done. Now, most of the time we're buying cash in a lot of these deals, or we're using hard money. So we don't really have a financing contingency. But then after that point, we validate several things before we close. Day of or day before close, we always make sure that house is vacant, assuming we're thinking we're going to buy it vacant. I'm sure you can attest to this. Getting somebody out of a house can kind of be a pain in the butt, whether that's a squatter or a tenant that's decided they don't want to leave. So we always make sure it's vacant. We make sure insurance is set up. We make sure that the utilities are cut over and that we're pretty good to go. But in today's market, especially with things being a little bit softer, you don't waive contingencies under any circumstances. Make sure you get all the information you need before you are committed to buying that home, or you're committed to losing that earnest money. A lot of less scrupulous wholesalers try and make that earnest money non-refundable, even if that the house is in worse condition than they initially indicated. Don't play that game. That I highly recommend you protect yourself, even if you have to pay for an inspection before you're under contract on something, which inherently has some risk that they might sell it to some other clown that isn't going to do their due diligence. It's better to waste that $500 than it is to buy a bad house. Ask me how I know. Amen. And but yeah, those are the things that I highly recommend. And now's the time where you get to negotiate and really hold your ground. There are more houses out there than there really are buyers, especially for the really distressed stuff. So now's a really good opportunity to make sure you're actually getting a good deal. Yeah, and not just doing a deal to do one.
For sure. And I love what you said. This is a different game, guys. Whatever game we were playing last year, it's just different, because before we couldn't negotiate that much because there was someone coming right in the door behind us and they're offering the same price or more money. So we're like, oh, if we got a deal, we got to get on it. We got to get it now, right? And what you said was, now you don't waive any contingencies. Before, like, all the contingencies were waived, right? Because cash, no inspections, everything. Just and now the game has changed, right? So now you can hold your ground, you can negotiate a little bit more, look at those creative ways to buy a house. Doesn't always have to be the same way in cash, and you can add contingencies on your plan. One thing that you said, Nick, was that your eyes don't add value. And that's really, really key. And I want people to hear that, is because a lot of times, they say, well, I want to see the house because I want to see, what I'm getting. And they walk the house. But you said your eyes don't add value. Not saying you don't do diligence. You actually send other people through. But you said your eyes don't add value. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. I've purchased 150 homes at this point. There's something around that number. I own 60 or 70 rentals right now. But at the end of the day, I don't know what things are going to cost. I can come up with estimates, but I don't actually have a true understanding of what it takes to fix something. And transparently, I don't have a very good eye for design either. There are people who are a whole lot more qualified to handle those things than I am. And so my role in this, and I think most of the people that are investing here in Indianapolis, many of whom are out of state, is to be a coordinator, be a connector of these qualified people, of these trusted people, pull them into your world and allow them to be the experts, give them the authority to make decisions on your behalf. Always have a checks and balances. And that's why I recommend having a contractor and an inspector. That's why I recommend having a property manager walk after a project's done, just to make sure that everything's done properly. But understand where you actually add value in the chain. If you've never swung a hammer in your life, you're probably not going to be the most important person that walks through the house. And just have a solid understanding of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that you've done just a great job building a great team. I think you've talked about that. You just sent out an email that you're just so proud of your team, and you've still say they don't even have to be the team that work directly with you. They could be just your service providers. Maybe that's their inspector, you built the relationship. Maybe it's the title company, you built a relationship. Maybe it's the insurance company. Maybe it's your project manager. I'm not sure, but like, what's the key to building such a great team for you?
Oh boy. Kiss a lot of frogs. First, I would say is the first one. Again, maybe that's another conversation that we go into about how to fire team members. But once you've built a team, be ridiculously generous with them, empower them to make decisions like I talked about. Don't micromanage decisions. Make sure things are moving forward. But if your contractor decides they want to use a dark brown versus a medium brown flooring, don't question that decision making too much unless it's really, really horrendous. Allow these people to excel, and then reward them. Understand that praise is one of the highest things that you can give somebody. I kind of always look back, and maybe this is a little woo woo for a little bit more of a hands-on type of podcast here, but I think about the 5 love languages and try and understand what the love languages are of the different members of my team. And I try and reward them in that way. Some of them, it's quality time. My contractor, it's quality time. Whenever I get the opportunity, I'll call him up and just thank him for what he's doing. I'll have him over to my house to have a drink. If you're flying in from out of town, take that person out. Words of affirmation, obviously another one. Maybe avoid the physical touch. That one can get a little awkward. Amen. But yeah, really just try and understand what each person responds to. One of the most powerful things I ever did as a thank you to somebody was I just gave them a gift card to take their wife out for a restaurant. That person has gone so far above and beyond. I think I bought them like a $200 gift card. They have done thousands of dollars worth of work for me completely for free, just because I thanked him with a $200 gift card so he could take his wife out for a nice meal. So just really try and be overly generous, reward people, and you'd be shocked at the amount of loyalty you're going to get from them.
I love it. I love it, man. You are awesome. Nick Giulioni, thank you so much for being on the Investor Podcast. I appreciate you and wish you so much success, man.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate it and hope to come back again someday.